Okay, so a C-suite partnership is if you're a CDO, then you're going to have all sorts of relationships with CIO, CMO, which is your marketing, your CIO is your information, your CTO is your technology, your CEO, your chief of operations. So those type of partnerships that you have to work within. So if you're working on the executive board, what would your elements be? All right, so this is quite an interesting feedback, and so this is what we're talking about. Sorry, Duncan?
No, that is fine, Howard.
Okay. So so it's fascinating there in terms of they call them game changers, and these are probably the most important elements to address when you're coming in as a CDO. And the first one is getting the right sponsorship and stakeholder. All right. So what I find is that partnership is probably the most important thing when you start. Okay. So if you don't have someone that's got your back, some people refer to it as if you don't have anyone who gets your data jokes, then you got some problems. Doesn't matter how good the strategy is and things like that. If you don't have proper support and stakeholder, you're gonna get into some challenges. And then they also talk about well-defined data strategy to give you direction, and then getting your fit-for-purpose data solutions, talent management, technology, and different leaders that are going to help you drive it. And then, of course, it's this partnering on the digital transformation. Okay, so what I've certainly found is that this, from a starting point, not from an overall thing. So when you're going to come in, you're probably looking at the softer issues, right? So you're going to be looking at your C-suite, your talent management, and supporting digital transformation. The other ones will be a lot easier for you to control, and when you get these other areas set up. But it will come over time. Any questions on that?
Howard, you are spot on. When I came into my role as the country head of data for Botswana, for Stanbic Bank, I used to have sort of regular engagements with the chief executive.
Yes.
And before long, then they introduced another executive who sat between me and the chief executive.
Right.
And now, for me, every 2 weeks, I give updates in terms of how we are doing in terms of execution of the data strategy. And, there's such a gap between me and the chief executive to a point where whenever we bump into each other, he says to me, I set up the data office to be able to commercialize and monetize data, but I'm not even aware of how far you are on this journey, the things that you are doing.
Sure.
But I thought I give regular updates to my executive sponsor who reports to the CE. And this has proven to be a challenge because I'm not actually sitting at the table alongside other executives, including the chief executive. It's such a, I've been at this thing, Howard, for if you look at this year alone, due to the data insights that have been generated by my team, business has actually made about 15 million rands additional sales. That was because of the customer insights from the data analytics that we did.
Right.
And two, we've got challenges of data quality across the bank. We've got challenges around deploying a data warehouse, a central data warehouse where all the data sources can go into that. And I don't even have support to put through this motivation, to motivate for that capital expenditure for that, and so I'm far away from them. So my jokes, they can't laugh at my jokes, the C-suite, because of that gap. Yeah.
You're 100% correct. This relationship and stakeholder and sponsorship, if you don't get that right, you almost in a game on your own, and the flow of information just deteriorates. And trying to get them to change is also really difficult. Yeah, well, I'm glad you confirmed that, because that's almost the areas that we need to lay the foundation before the strategy comes in and starts running. And that constant, what they also refer to as data cheerleaders. If you don't have those cheerleaders that people get recognized, you struggle. All right, so here's the next check that I wanted to just and go through that. So if you wouldn't mind just ranking those skills, what do you think the skills should be in terms of a CDO? Interesting. Nice. One more. Okay. Nice. Okay. So, how many of you guys have heard of this this new? I must have picked it up about a month and a half ago, 2 months, where they talk about T-shaped skills. So this is what we when we refer to this. This is the T-shaped skills, right? So what they're saying is that you've got lots of breadth and understanding across change management, business drivers, and collaboration and evangelism. That's across the business unit. But the depth comes in at this level. So what they're saying is that a CDO should have lots of depth within governance, infrastructure, and tools and methods. But the breadth is important in terms of connecting with the entire organization. So we'll talk about these skills, but what we are finding and what we're hearing is that these are the top skills that make it successful, and this is really good background, but you probably could find good supporting people to help you with this. And so we are finding, for example, the new generation of CDOs are coming from marketing, from analytics, and these guys tend to have this understanding and not a lot of this understanding over here. So it's quite an interesting skill shape that you put together. But when you put your CVs together, you got to be able to explain how you've been able to transform the behavior of the organization, to lead the organization, to understand what the business drivers are and to help them with that, and then to look at the collaboration. So that's going to become paramount in your CV. And if you notice, of course, they're going to look at, well, what background have you got to support all of this? And to say it's not a technician, not a programmer or data scientist, it's someone that can handle these different things and drive value. And then also the fact that you have technical knowledge of data. That's potential and an asset and helpful to your CV, but here is where you need to focus on. Any questions or comments on that?
Howard,
Yes.
So you mentioned that some people will not necessarily need that depth of the specific data skills because they could have the right people that support them in that.
Yes.
How as a non-specialist can you evaluate? Because the people that you pick are going to be key. Then how do you evaluate those people as someone who doesn't understand necessarily?
Yeah, so that becomes a tricky side of it, and that's when when you profile the people and you try to look at where their skills are within this level of information governance. And a good example of that, what you're raising here, is on LinkedIn, I could be saying I've got 20 years of experience on information governance, and this is what I've been doing, and things like that. But how do we know that you are capable of doing this job? So you're going to have to be focusing on the references, getting input from other people, what they've achieved, what sort of transformation they've been able to achieve in those different areas. And as you say, if you don't have those skills, then you're going to have to depend maybe on HR or someone like that doing a comprehensive analysis of the skills that you're picking up on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, tricky. I agree with you in terms of how do you get that. It's going to be relationships. You're going to just find the right person that you click with and that you can trust. And a lot of it's about trust. Okay, so the next one is the key data steps. So again, I would like you to rate this, and we'll use this as, in terms of our 3-week discussion, we'll probably deal with one of these at a time in terms of how do you achieve that. So we'd just like to get your response on. One more. Okay. All right. So this is all three of these are really important. And you'll find that this thing of driving the C-suite to make decisions based on data is going to take a long time. And they will probably get trust, or you'll build trust when you can accelerate the data strategy to enable business transformation. So this process of creating the data strategy is tremendous for understanding or convincing the C-suite that you have heard what they have to say, and that you can help them achieve what they need to do. So they will see for the outputs of your data strategy, they will see that you've heard what their problems are, you understand the drivers, you understand what's going on, and you've set a roadmap, and you've set a decent roadmap. So the data strategy is really good at communicating that, but I believe the end result is transforming everybody in the organization, that they will use data to help them make decisions. All right. So I don't know if any of you, and I don't have this diagram here, but we build this continuum to have companies that are data resistant. That means that they really don't trust the data. And if you ask the C-suite to make decisions on data, they'll laugh at you. and then you take them to what's called data enabled. So you fixed all the data problems. We then go into a scenario where you are data led. So people are now starting to see, wow, I'm getting all these insights and I can actually make a difference and I can improve the business performance, to a point where they're saying, if the data says it, then that's where we got to start focusing on. I think it's really important that it's augmenting your insights. It's not removing your requirement to make a decision. And especially if you've got the data that you've got to make the decision, you don't have all of the data. Remember, I think yesterday we spoke about fuzzy decision making, where you don't have all the data to give you a complete or a very simple algorithm to say, if this says that and that, then you must do this. Not a lot of the top decisions are at that level. You may have operational decisions that are at that level, but certainly not business strategy and business direction decisions. Any questions on that?
That's good. Thank you.
No, that's good. I'm good.
Okay, so data strategy is key, guys. One of the things that we talk about is that if you don't have a strategy, what starts to happen within the business? So for those that haven't got a clear strategy or the execs aren't aware of the strategy, can you guys just give me examples of what starts to happen? So there's some key indicators when you go into an organization and you listen to the execs. What are the things that they what is the sort of behavior that you recognize?
Frustrated because of the lack of value.
Sorry, Paul?
They feel frustrated because they can't see value.
Right.
So there's nothing telling them that we're delivering, or there's movement forward.
Right. There's certainly that. There's a level of frustration and questioning as to how much money they're putting in there. Duncan, from your side?
Yeah, I'll mention two, Howard. I think the first one was there is this issue where they say, why are we investing? Why are we building this empire?
Yeah.
We thought you had enough people. Why do you keep on asking for more headcount?
Yeah.
And I tell them, no, a data scientist, what they do, it's purely analytics and insights and data science models and all that. And
Right.
a data quality specialist that I need is going to just focus on data quality. And they're saying, why can't a data scientist do the data quality?
Right.
And when I ask for a data governance person to say, guys, we need somebody who's going to specifically look for policies around POPI or POPIA. In Botswana, we call Data Protection Act,
Yes.
KYC or other regulatory stuff, and even internal policies around data. And they feel you are just building an empire because they don't understand the strategy. The second one is they throw everything to you. If somebody wants a certain spreadsheet that does something, they say, why can't the data office do this? Because they think, so they throw everything to you. And so if you don't have a clear-cut strategy, and that connects actually to the business strategy to say, these are the things that you do, you are going to have a big problem.
Right. So
someone else just made a comment about shooting. You start seeing decisions that are kind of like shooting from the hip,
right?
Or impulsiveness. So you're changing direction every day. Things are changing. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's try this. You know.
That's the biggest indicator. Okay. When you just someone they were driving home last night and they heard about this new fintech that made all this money, and they've been able to change all the business and they're disrupting everything. And then the thing is, why don't we do that? Until it doesn't work, and then why don't we do this? And then why don't we do that? So whenever you're seeing them flip-flopping, like within the last year or so, and they've tried all sorts of stuff, and they can tell you all these war stories, you basically know that they don't have a proper data strategy. And so they're not seeing the roadmap, they're not seeing the path, and they're not seeing the progression. and then they're just clutching at straws and grasping at things to help change and help them compete. I mean, all of them are knowing that data is critical, that the new AI, the new 4IR is driving them. And they're just looking for answers, and they're seeing that they're deteriorating. And if you remember all those profitability things, then I mean those differences are big. So if we just go back to that, when they have these comparisons, all right, look at the difference in profitability between 26%, right, between companies that are using proper use of data and companies that are not, and the challenges that they have. So of course they're going to say, well, how do I get there? Now I want to do that. Okay, now let's go and bring in machine learning, or let's go and try the latest thing, or some management consultants or vendor comes along and says, look what I can do. I can pick up fraud. I can detect all these things. I can save your business money. I can generate revenue, but they haven't got the people inside to fix it. And they haven't got the fact that it takes time, because what we are seeing in data strategies is a situation of you'll typically have to fix the problems with your data, then you'll have to fix the people, then you'll have to go after the interesting stuff and the stuff that makes you the real money. So it's almost, let's get our house in order, let's fix all our operational issues. Once we've got that, then we can start playing fancy games with the data. Otherwise, we're just going to get all sorts of answers coming out and moving on. Does that make sense, guys?
Very much, Howard, and that speaks to your T skills again. If you're not a change agent or an evangelist to top execs, non-data people, you're going to lose this fight, because they keep shouting for more profit, for more revenue, and they're just driving, get that client no matter what, tell them, promise things that we can't actually do just to get the business. And at the end of the day, you're hemorrhaging big time, and you're sinking the ship.
100%. Okay, so we've seen that's what happens is the execs don't really understand data within their business, and so they're gonna start gut feeling. Let's go with this new thing that makes sense. All right, so the next one I wanted to check with you guys is, won't you rank these in terms of what do you believe the top 3 roadblocks are to a CDO? And we probably, in some of these things we've heard from Duncan talking about the lack of focus, the lack of funding. We've heard, so those are the ones we've picked up. Okay, so roadblocks, lack of focus. Then we have culture. Then we have literacy, not really understanding data. Then we have lack of funding and skills. So here's what Gartner produced: cultural changes. And look how high data literacy is, and skills. And then we get into the lack of focus and lack of funding. So it's interesting. It's telling us that people can't take them there. The other side is that people don't understand data, and then it's about change. And I was talking to a lady that I worked with at the central bank, and she's a change manager. And one of the things that I asked her, and I'm appealing to her, is to say, what I'd love to do is work with her specifically on helping change within the data management environment, to specialize in that area, because I don't think it's good enough just to understand change. You've got to know how to tell a story about data. To bring in all of these three different areas over here. And then, of course, change talks about skills and staff. That's how we pick it up. Then we've got all the things that we'd like to get onto, the important initiatives, then the support programs in terms of data quality and master data. Here are your problems up here. So if you can't get the ear of the CEO, the CDO, as you're saying, Duncan, they can't understand these requests down the bottom here, all right? They're just not going to understand it. And so you fight all the time.
Howard,
Yes.
when you say poor data literacy, is that on the side of the other executives?
Yes, so and it's poor data literacy within the organization, Sheldon. So when you've got people like your data management professionals that are very data literate, and data literacy is a bit of a harsh term, but everyone, the industry is calling that, and it's almost a case of when you read data, can you read it and can you understand what it's saying to you? So when they present you with all different graphs, pie charts, line charts, scatter plots, and stuff like that, can you read it and understand what it's telling you about the business and interpret that and relate it to the challenges you're facing? And that's what they're saying. The other one that I really liked was the definition by MIT, and they spoke about all the different areas of data literacy, but the final comment that they made was, can you argue with data? So if you have Sorry, Sheldon?
So they're finding that executives are struggling with that.
Yeah, executives are. And there's actually, and I'm sure I've shared this with you guys, but they've diagnosed a new behavior that's developing in the boardroom, and it's called data bullying, where someone who's the more data literate is using that as power to convince people that they need to listen to what he says. Duncan?
No, you've covered it, Howard. I wanted to just share what data literacy means, but that is it. You've covered it.
Right.
And what we've done is we've actually rolled out a course that is available to all employees of the bank, the C-suite, all the way down to a teller. And the goal is to be able to help everyone, and we've positioned it as the future skills, so and to create the right appetite.
Right.
And we say in the future, everyone needs to be data literate, and we do call those people data citizens in the new economy.
Okay.
People who are able to read data, understand it, and interpret what it means, be able to tell the story that the data is telling them,
Right.
and use that to actually argue using data and making decisions based on data and not on that you like someone or on other things like that. But decision
trust. So it's that trust, right? I trust that person, therefore I'll believe what he says in comparison to what the data is saying. There was another really nice presentation that I went and attended about a year ago, and there was this lady that's one of the top BI ladies in the world, and she was providing advisory services to this one business, and one morning she came in there and she was looking at some of the visualizations and the results. And the CEO came in there and he says, "Please, can I talk to you?" And he didn't want to talk in front of everyone, and he pulled her into his office and he said, "Look at these graphs that people have given me. I have no idea what they're telling me." And so they start to feel embarrassed, and they don't admit to the fact that they can't understand it. And so the games that they start to play in terms of that, and not understanding, then you have all sorts of challenges with that. So the board level people that are getting some of this data, because just to your point, Sheldon, your question that you asked, the normal line graphs and bar charts are not working when it comes to massive data sets. So when you start seeing patterns, these normal line graphs don't see it, because you've got tremendous amount of activity on the actual graph. And so we've got to look at new ways of doing it. And they've actually created a new field, which is almost an analytic visualization. They call it data visualization. And these people are trying to deal with the amazing amount of data that they're getting, and B, trying to get that visualization to tell stories to the people that are not skilled in understanding those data areas. So this is an ongoing challenge and something that the guys are battling with higher up. Everyone okay with that?
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So this is I think this is the last question in terms of the problem space. And these are the different areas that executives need to be aware of. So I wanted also just to get some feedback from you in terms of where would you like us to focus, and how do we understand these different areas? All of them. Okay. I see we've got a lot of the data engineers here. So the desire is on how do you keep the data healthy? Duncan, I'm sure this was you. Okay. So yeah, maybe just to talk you through some of these areas. So this is what you've got to look at across within your data strategy, is finding ways to use the existing data assets, and that's probably one of the hardest things. Data protection, I think we all know about that, the GDPR, the data privacy. Data upkeep is managing the health of data under governance. And that's quite an important point, is how do we, as CDOs, only allow data that's under governance to be presented in terms of decision making. All right, so how do we ensure that whenever someone comes to the boardroom and says, look at all these figures and look at all the stuff that I've seen, there's good governance for that. So where did you get the data from? What's the data quality of it? What's the filtering? When you applied the model, how much of the data did you actually use, and is it fit for purpose? Then the other area that we talk about is data enrichment, which is augmenting data by combining internal and also external data. So that's where, for example, Discovery made some amazing transitions where they started linking their insurance data to health data to all sorts of, it's this correlation and links to data outside in telling them what's going on. Okay, because sometimes, quite often, you don't have enough data inside your organization to give you the answers that you're looking for. So you'd look for things, and I know, as an example, with the data, with Discovery on the insurance and the health, they started using the tracking. I'm sure you've seen some of that, where they're looking at the tracking to understand how well they're driving, and therefore reducing the insurance premiums. And they looked at a company called C-Track, where they got the initial data from, and then they could develop correlations and causations between that data and what the insurance premiums were. So that's where they started breaking the mold, started achieving some of those benefits. So it's this enrichment. So it's not just using the existing data to calculate, it's also looking at how do I find other data to tell me what's going on and to give me better insights. And then, of course, monetization is how do we look for new avenues there in that scenario and new revenue. Okay, so that's upkeep. We got to get our data right. We got to keep that, and we got to have the trust within the data. And then when we start reaching out to enrichment of going to find other data areas, so if and this comes back to our discussion yesterday when we talk about how do we understand the decisions, what data is sufficient to help us make the decision. And there's a mathematical process that you can actually prove that this data can contribute to the answer, or it's got nothing to do with it, therefore ignore it. So also part of the data upkeep is getting rid of the data that's actually not contributing. It's more of a liability than anything else, and it confuses the arguments and the discussions. And then it's about which data assets do we have, and taking that hard look at the data that we got and saying, well, is it helping us with our decision making, or do we need to get extra data? And then, of course, protection, and then the obvious one in terms of monetization. Once you've got all these underlying things, then you can start looking at the monetization. But of course, your CEO is going to come to the monetization first to say, okay, how do we make more money? How do we generate more revenue? And you've got to actually convince them using your data strategy that you've got to look at all of these different areas over here. All right, guys, are there any questions on that?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. All right, so what we will do now is take all the information that you've given us, and we'll structure the next 3 weeks to pick up on these different areas and look at how do we employ things like the data strategy to help us address the different areas and help us bring all of this together. Does that make sense?
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, guys. I'd love to thank you. Sorry we finished a bit early, but if you have any other questions, is there something you think we haven't dealt with that you would like to hear about as part of being an executive?
No, for me it's the intros. Maybe I skipped them while I was taking my boss's call, but just intros amongst ourselves. I haven't met Sheldon, and it would be nice to.
Yeah, maybe we can do that. Should we start with Paul, and then we'll go Sheldon, and then Duncan.
Thanks, Howard. Yes, it's Paul, and I worked with Modelware from 2008 until 2015 initially, and then went off into the wilderness for a little while and found my way back, and now engage with on the business development, business management side, assisting with the Modelware training portfolio and the academia side of it. So helping driving those initiatives and assisting people to become certified, also identify different learning pathways, and support those strategies on that side. So that's my role and where I'm focusing at the moment. So thanks, Howard.
No, I think, Paul, the thing that was really interesting once you had moved on is you got into a lot of data reporting and data analysis for your customers, and I think you learned all the challenges that you guys faced.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that experience is really helpful in being able to relate to people and relate to situations where they are not comfortable with the data, and in some cases they're pretty data resistant.
Absolutely. I think one of the, without naming and shaming where I was, the change was one of the biggest resistance areas. People unwilling to change, unwilling to even try,
Right.
and not grasping that, rubbish in, rubbish out. It's an old analogy or old saying, but it's so true when it comes to data, obviously. And so you spend your time trying to deliver decent information that can help lead or drive the business, because that's obviously everybody's agenda is let's be data driven. But that is so, coming back and looking at all this with you and then relating it back to those stories, I can see how far off everything was. And we were just, in fact, speaking about a data, or the absence of a data strategy, just speaks volumes to how everybody was just treading water and just trying to stay alive by finding any mechanism possible without actually sitting down and saying, right, let's consolidate, let's fix this thing, and let's build a roadmap ahead. And that's what's so powerful about what I'm learning as well, and what I'm able to also relate to others as we're engaging. So yeah, it's brilliant.
So it's amazing. You were with one of the big companies. The company is really big.
Yeah.
And you were sitting in this area of you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. So no, absolutely. And you can hear the desperation in the leadership. Yeah. They know that digitization is the future. That, as you said just now, they know all these things because they read it all the time. But with respect, they don't know how to get there. And they don't actually always need to they don't need to know how. They rely on data people or data professionals to help them with that. And because of that talent problem or skills problem, the frustration levels just keep rising and rising and rising, and they don't know they don't know how to fix it actually. You're hemorrhaging, you know that you're hemorrhaging, you just don't know how to fix it. So you make excuses, you try this, you try that, and it's an incredible case study actually to look at, but it's quite scary, yeah. And I'm sure it's not unique. Duncan alluded to that as well, and I can hear some great initiatives that they're doing, but I'm sure he can testify they've got a long way to go to stop the hemorrhage, to help that organization and all organizations become world data-driven leaders, But so thanks.
Sheldon?
Can you hear me? Sorry, yes, my speed is very slack. Sorry, I figured I had to turn my camera on to introduce myself. So I'm actually a student, MSc student at Imperial College Business School in London. So I'm a ways away, but yeah, so it's me studying international management.
Okay. So we may even have some topics of research for you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Duncan?
Thanks, Howard. It's a pleasure to meet you, Sheldon. And Paul, it's nice to put, I don't know how to finish that sentence, whether it's the name to the face or the face to the name.
Face to the name.
All right, face to the name. Thanks.
Well, invite me to Bots and I'll come and meet you in person.
He has already. We just got to go there.
Immediately when the borders get open, you are coming. You're coming.
Awesome.
There are a number of things that I'm planning with Howard, so definitely. So I work for Standard Bank Group. Standard Bank. It's all over, but with a focus in Africa. So I'm in one of the markets, and one of those markets is Botswana. So this side we call it Stanbic Bank Botswana, and we recently established a data office. So it's to operate as a center of excellence, as a centralized data office that will help the bank to be future ready, as we have said here, that we all know that in the digital economy that we are stepping into, it's important to understand the data that you have and actually make sure that you can trust that data and use it for commercialization to better understand your customers, to anticipate their needs, predict the trends or whatever patterns that you can get from the data. So I am the head of that data office, and my goal is to become a CDO, and I strongly believe that with the help of Howard, I will get there. Currently, they just call it as a head of data. So I look at both the data exploitation, which is the data scientist, the analytics and all of that, and also the governance side, which is more around the data management. So those are that is what I do. That's it really. I'll keep it as short as that.
Thanks, Duncan. And we were very fortunate that I think it's M actually invited us to talk at the data conference that it was for all the countries in Africa for Standard Bank. They actually held one in Botswana, Stanbic, and it was fantastic. I think we spent it was 2 days, 2 or 3 days there.
2 days.
Yeah,
and that's where we met Duncan, and that's fantastic. And he expressed a great interest to set up a DAMA Botswana. So we're certainly trying to help him get that going. And so that's where we'd, Paul, as soon as the borders open. And the other thing is that our friend Duncan's got to pass some of the exams. So you can establish that company, and then we'll go and spend some time with him. But that can happen before then as well. So Duncan, we're looking forward to you passing your exams and coming to visit.
Fantastic.
Thanks for the pressure, Howard. Thanks for the pressure. That helps.
Yeah, you'll make it.
By way of update, Howard, I actually had a meeting last week with Mick, and we managed to put together a list of potential people in a spreadsheet that we would like to be members of the chapter. So we will be approaching you end of August. Yeah.
Okay. So Paul Meek, we actually trained a year ago, 18 months ago. She came down from Botswana to South Africa, and we did some data management training, and within she did pretty well. I think within like 3 months she wrote all the exams.
And so, she did really well. I think she's a master.
No, so that's fantastic. So you really got some great people up there, and we look forward to spending time with you.
Thank you.
Excellent, guys. Thank you very much for the time.
Thanks, everybody. Brilliant.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks.